Hello everyone. Today we will be discussing the dimensions of freedom. And so when we are looking out through the existential form of man, we are alive in a way which is profound to us. This profundity has an aspect of our unknown, and so we begin to see that life is growing and you are doing naturally what you're meant to be doing. What that means is there was an intention for your design, and once you see it, you will always see that everything was intended in the way it was. Because your certainty to reality is justifying for you that destiny was not simply a destiny in space and time. It was the reach of the being to a point where its absolute experience needed no other distinction. So when we look at the dimensions of freedom, we're simply talking about in how many ways the human being perceives a world in which there's a suggestion of a certain individual. For how long does individual consciousness need to be retained in the human construct? And so as you begin to see that this biological being is evolving, its evolution is one of it letting go of what it was before to be what it can be now. When you look at evolution, it's all suggesting that the reason it's a change, the reason we think time is moving forward is simply because how we are perceiving it is only one situated platform of awareness to reality. So what that means is the way we're looking at things, we can simply say that this is just an existential view. You're an existential point of attention and awareness. Now, as you are this, you begin to realize because others are, the similarities in your nature, we're simply all coming down to the fact that we are all present beyond our distinctions. So humanity is recognizing that after he's gotten human rights, he's needing existential rights, because you need to have a compassionate, immediate reality to be able to handle many other realities very simply and gently and peacefully. Your intuition is at times the sanctuary of you finding a self which you trust. It's an action, and in that action there is your knowing of intuition. Because if you're not acting and if you're in a different state of consciousness, the intuition is not there. The intuition is how there is an aspect of you self-communicating beyond the dimensions of perception that man has. Beyond the space and time, there's an aspect of existential intelligence, let us say, that is keeping you. So this is going more into the observance of man. And the observance of man is really what's giving dimension to the ideology of freedom. Because freedom is now becoming more than an objective observance. The beautiful thing that many people don't recognize about saying that the world is objective, that it's making people think if it's objective or not. So science is, in a sense, catalyzing the world by making it think about whether if it's actually like that or not. And so we realize all theories were meant to enhance man, and as you take it as such, you are enhanced. So we need to be aware of what reality is, and in that our freedom becomes where the self-awareness is being presented, and in a sense the forms that it is aware of, the objects of experience come into place, as they have always been placed. So that moment where evolution was meaningful, there was also a suggestion that evolution was happening now. So it was, Darwin on some level knew, gosh, regardless of how much I've given a theory, but this is happening now. So there's realms of philosophy that as long as we don't consider them, this evolution is a sustainable method. Because we're more than the evolution suggested. We are the greatest ability able to transition what is here. What that means is that you realize the human being, regardless of its illusion, it is naturally moving. This life intelligence is growing the way it is. That tree is growing the way it is. And if you don't do anything, you are simply manifesting, and there are certain intentions happening. It's as if man is, in a sense, a seed planted by a collective hand. And so what this really means is that we are not caring about origin stories, but the experiencer of the story. And so this is beyond characteristics, and the sooner you understand, the more the presence of the being becomes significant, and you can begin to see that those gurus who traveled from the east to communicate here, they were here to suggest the presence of man and the freedom that suggested through the clarity. So regardless of where you are, you want to have existential clarity, and this existential clarity is just simple freedom and self-awareness. So that is kind of what realization and enlightenment can be said to be, because it is, in a sense, you being aware of where the light is coming from, and as you become aware of it, you were never different from the light in your eyes. What you measured was present just as you are, and so what was keeping both of you present was an awareness that needed no distinction. There was no separation. It was all in an instant of knowing, and in that moment of observing that instant of knowing, you were the unknown. So it's a collective intelligence that's unspeakable, and man doesn't need to worry about it that much, but he needs to be aware of where all his intentions are heading, and his confrontation must be done with acceptance. So you must be okay to let things pass, and they could be shifts in many stories and aspects of your reality, but you will be comfortable, for you know who you are. You are going with the knowing of the self. Your freedom is really based on your chains, and your chains are based on your interpretation. So if we think we're someone, gosh, I don't have enough time to do this, oh, I'm not here, gosh, what have I been doing with my life? Regardless of where we are or in what stage of thought and range of thought we are, if you begin to observe what mankind is, you see that the reason he is kind is because he does not know. And once a human being recognizes that unknown aspect of experience, he transitions into a modality of being that is enriched by the wealth that is already here. So I'm no longer handling my problems, it is the whole cosmos with me right now, handling. Because all problems were simply an individual what associated to be individual. And this association, this intelligence is omnipresent, so it is untouched on some level. What that means is on some level we're like, oh man, I'm this individual body, look at how I'm moving my hands. And then on some instant level, we are the simultaneous acknowledgement of all the possibilities that this can be, and the awareness of it. It's if what is aware of action is being in such a profound way that if you just observe the nature of being, you would see that it is beyond human ideology. It is beyond any form. So welcome to the mystic's eyes, and I would say search a seat of yoga. And recognize that we're at a new time. And what that means is when mankind steps into a new state of consciousness, we also don't need too much of the words of people in the past either. So it's like a new condition. It's as if like mankind right now, we're driving. Me alive talking right now and everybody else alive hearing this, we're just steering. We're steering mankind by our actions every day. So as we're doing this, it's very important for us to become aware that the purpose is beyond what we perceive, and that is how the knowing is here to even be possible. So philosophy could also suggest how there's a transition in state of consciousness, and the same images in one dimension are perceived in another. So what that means is freedom can go from a man getting out of prison, whether that man is Hitler or Nelson Mandela. And also there's an aspect of this where you begin to see that this freedom is an existential freedom. It is one where your sense of wanting to know something so deeply has taken you to the edge of your understanding, and so ignorance has faded because you're so seeking to know the truth of your truth that you're kind of moving in a way where it's very important to become sensitive of the emptiness of reality. Because if you do not, you will always be oriented based on the ideology and the objectivity that is around you. And you don't just want that, you want an orientation that is omnipresent and multidimensional in its knowing. So what that means is right now, don't be too dependent on culture or others understanding your sense of multidimensionality, because no one has your eyes. So you are a unique view, and as a unique view, simply live the way you're living and just contribute in your own portfolio, or just imagine 8 billion people just begin just writing certain ideas about what their life is and what life is in general. Can you imagine the communication and understanding we could have in an instant? It is all about human communication and the awareness that human communication is not limited to the voice of just humanity, but the voice of all life. So humanity is not governing nations only. Humanity is governing areas of existence. So what that means is, if you were to look at, let's say if we had an astronaut's view of Earth, and we just began to see in some manner that all these social movements are just a simple change, you begin to see that when a being is found within cyclical existence, nothing can be the truth when the form's always changing. So the truth must be an aspect of your direct experience that goes to such an absolute moment where it's as if everything has stopped. Any concept of a beginning or an end or a duality of good and bad has just stopped. And you are in that instant realizing how much you have had the ability of allowing ideology to enter your life. And immediately the ability you can have to change your ideology. As you realize your communication changes based on your foundation of thought changing, your foundation of what you think reality is, your perception of life, you begin to see that you will care for life not as an individual, but perhaps as an individuality that is so aware of its collective that it is the expression of its collective will. So that form of governance is not ignoring anything, because it is coming out of the intuition of the world. And so you will begin to see at that point man's consciousness has evolved to a point where he is no longer dependent on technologies that are stimulating a formed and biological body. He has moved to a point where he's transcendentally aware of all forms of conception. It's as if that moment where we were stabilized in one platform of self-awareness, we could create. The minute man came, this consciousness came into the human form, and there was self-awareness, there came infinite possibility of worlds, projections, and outcomes in reality. There was a spark of self-awareness, a touch of some form of celestial designers blueprint. I hope that you kind of see, guys, that humanity can only talk so much until it realizes that it must take existential responsibility for infinity. You must take a responsibility for the fact and the understanding that there is more to human consciousness than can ever be spoken about. So you are the explorer who can then bring forth your greater experience. So what that means is, when I was younger, I didn't know what to do, so I would look at the lives of some people who I felt like they knew what to do. Let's say idols, or whether it was Gandhi, Martin Luther King, or whoever it was, many prophets and gurus, and just people who were doing the opposite of what I thought the world was doing, And so I kind of noticed that leaders, when they take leadership, they are seeking the greatness of all that they are leading. true leaders. And so you begin to see this leadership goes to a point where the leader sees that if any of the people he's leading wants to come into a position of leadership, he allows. Not in an overthrowing Macbeth, psychopath type of way, but in a very organized and sincere manner. You kind of begin to see that you are always given what you are qualified for, which is your present moment. So if you're a being, and regardless of what guilt or mistake or whatever you've done, and if you're just observing in this life, and for a second you begin to see that there is always a new moment of interpretation, you cannot let the past speak to you in the same way anymore. You cannot keep illusion when you get a glimpse from your clear eyes. Existential clarity is your allowance to dissolve in your trust of life and where it is taking you. And through such means, there's a blessing in which the Savior, in the moment of saving one man, in the moment of taking another man up the ladder, realized he had given all mankind. That moment. If you really want to make someone joyful, and you will begin to see, if, like for example, many of these gurus in ancient India and just around the world in many spiritual cultures and traditions, these people were beings who they were so honest and direct in acting real with life that if there was any unreal communication, they would cleanse that moment with the knowing of the reality they were in, which was an omniscience and collective sense of being. And you kind of see that the ability of the guru is in how he is bringing forth his manifestation of communication as a being. His presence, his existence, the quality of it, you will begin to see that is a guru simply by just the way in which composure keeps itself in the presence of such a being. And the guru has the ability to confront your moment and to immediately give you an existential mirror for you to see that don't ask anyone for any of your problems. And this does not mean don't talk to anyone ever. It just simply means that before you try to find a solution, see if you're really in the problem. See what has decreased of your ability and see your position, and then calculate whether you have failed or not. Many people think they have failed before they have failed, and it reduces their ability. We want efficiency, and in a world where there's technological advancement, it means that man must not ignore technology, but must make his whole environment his mind, in which a body is present to be free in any way. So the dimensions of freedom change into how everything is kept within an awareness, which is now, and this present moment is the platform where simultaneous realities of creation can be acknowledged. And as they are, you are the omniscient observance and the experience of it. Of course, you need to realize that what Mr.Within is talking about here, guys, is simply about new advancements in human consciousness and what the human being really is. It's as if there's some things that need to be said. However, simultaneously, there's some things that cannot be said because it's dependent on the development of the system. So what that means is when you try to figure out a system which you can't really understand as an individual being in it, you do not ignore the system and acknowledge anything that is in your proximity of knowing something and being aware of something as an instant of existence which you can call it divine or not, but it is kept in a way where by your awareness to this aspect of what you are as a being, you see how you are transcendent. It is there. It is there. Freedom is always here, and it is sometimes the thoughts of blindness which cannot be true, which are limiting man. See, Mr. Within is not worried that you will be lost in the cycles of karma, or what many people have suggested many beings are in now. Mr. Within is worried about what is the most exciting phenomena that can happen in this plane of existence, and it has to be one that is making an effort to understand itself in more profound ways. So regardless of what being you are, if you begin to see and become self-aware and see how you have come into this manifestation, you were never alone. For everything else that was allowing you in a separate way making you separate, was your sense of other, has just become found through the sense of self. Dissolution in ideology, where an irrationality is found, and there's a silence that can no longer rationalize but wonder about the peak of experience as a self-aware being in this life. And I hope in that recognition, the dimensions of freedom suggest that you were always beyond space and time, and how that is how the multidimensionality is there. You are within a knowing in which you may think you don't know, but that knowing always knows. It is as if mankind forgets what planet he's on, the planet will never forget what planet it's on. And so such a remembrance is the reunion of a being with the aspect of its experience that was always free. Look at the sky, and you will see there's no need for an end or a beginning. Much blessings and namaste.